Welcome to Anita Talks History and Genealogy. So pleased that you all could join me today. It is Tuesday, the 21st of October, and it is a couple of days after the No Kings March. And I want to thank everyone who showed up and participated in one way or another for the No Kings March. They don't like it, but let's stop trying to do what they like. You know, we've been here, we've done that, we're not having it, you know. And it's time for us to join together as people of color, as people who want to live in a free society, and make a plan for the exit of this person who has stolen our democracy, our so-called democracy. So let's say it like this. It's a democracy in progress. And we as people of color, we see some progress at one point, and then the progress is rolled back. And that's what's going on now. Our progress that we fought for is being rolled back by this person who is DJT, I don't even want to say the name, who is like a third generation immigrant. And most of his cabinet are like 2 or 3 generations into these United States, and they are immigrants. But at the same time, what is he doing? He and his administration are deporting immigrants. So ponder that for a minute. Because some of you are blaming the immigrants, saying they took our jobs, they're getting all this money, and they're, blaming the immigrants when you should be standing at the door of your federal government, the state government, the counties, because they are the ones that are crafting those laws and bringing in people who they are exploiting. That's what the focus should be as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, I wanted to open with that. Like I said, this is Anita Talks Genealogy, and Anita Talks History and Genealogy. And the reason that I am here and I'm speaking to you here on my YouTube channel is that we need to stop being surprised when they do something. I always want to point out that they've done this before. Nothing that they do is new. So before I start, please hit that like and subscribe button, and also share it, on your social media outlets, and make some comments that are, relevant to the discussion, to what I am, speaking on. And, today I'm just going to keep it, kind of light, because I think that the country has a lot on its mind. There is people who are finding their way into poverty, newly, people losing their lands, losing their livelihoods, and they're finding out what it is like to be a person of color or a person who is descended from slaves. Me and my people, the indigenous people of these lands, and the ancestors that I know of that did come from Africa were brought here, enslaved. So I call myself Afro-Indigenous, and the reason being that I have a dear, beloved great-great-grandmother who was enslaved from Guinea, West Africa, when she was 12 years old. We call her Leah, or they called her Leah. And she's like the furthest back African that I have been able to trace. So I honor her because she left a story about Guinea the place where she was stolen from, where she, at the age of 12, okay? And it was in 1830, so it was actually illegal to sell African slaves in the United States. Think about that, okay? This was, you know, during slavery, but it was illegal. It had become illegal after the war, the war for independence. But they got around it by taking her and the children from her village to Bermuda and seasoning them. And if you saw Kunta Kinte on Roots, you saw somewhat what it was like for these children to be seasoned. I don't know how old she was when she was brought here and sold as a Caribbean slave. But by the time she was born in 1818, and she was in 1830 is when she was brought here at 12 years old, brought, to the Caribbean, Bermuda. So by the time that I saw the first census with her name on it. Well, not her name, just the name of the person who purchased her. And he had all female slaves. His name was Robert Ruth. And they were in Beaufort District, South Carolina, on his plantation. But he didn't have any male slaves. He only had females. And I believe he was breeding them. I know he bred my great-great-grandmother because he is my great-great-grandfather. Okay? And not only do I know that by, the stories that she passed down, but I know that because on Ancestry, his other white descendants are our DNA cousins, and some of them have even contacted us. But, they just saying, oh, are you a descendant of Robert Ruth? And we're yes, and then we never hear from him again. So this is the man, Robert Ruth, who owned great-great-grandmother Leah, impregnated her. She had 4 children, but she also had a lot of black children. And what Leah said was, they sold all my black children. And it was so sad to, this is what she was telling her granddaughter, who was my grandmother. She was telling her story, while other people were trying to tell a different story. They were just saying, oh, she was Caribbean. They didn't do the research. Well, after I did the research, they did go back and say, yes, you're right. So Leah had 4 mulatto children with the owner. His wife was right there with all these women on his plantation that he was breeding. I mean, there weren't no men. He was on a plantation. And it was all women and children. So what he did, I believe that Leah went through a period of having another black child and him selling it. And I believe that she was begging him, don't sell my child. And she kind of went off and became too much a problem for Robert. So he sold her. And she wound up being sold to Hilton Head, South Carolina. He sold her away from her children. And there's a painting. My great aunt, Ida Jones, Ida Ruth Jones, is a painter in Chester County, Pennsylvania, and her paintings are, hanging in museums all throughout, like in Philadelphia and places like that. And private collectors have her paintings. But one of the paintings was about her, Leah, seeing her daughter being sold away. And the daughter had red hair, like two ponytails. She was in a wagon, and you could see that Leah was chasing the wagon. Leah wasn't in the painting, but you could tell the desperation from seeing that painting that the child was calling the mother in this wagon. And it was so descriptive. But they painted it from the stories that Leah was telling. And my ancestor, Samuel Ruth, after the mother was, the mother was sold to Hilton Head, and she knew, and the daughter was sold before the mother. So the mother was watching the daughter being sold away. But Samuel, my ancestor, and his other siblings were sold to Savannah as house slaves because they were mulatto, okay? And that's where Samuel was during the Civil War. He was born in 1850. So he was like 13 or 14 or so during the Civil War. He was born in July of 1850. And the Civil War started there in 1865. So he was about 15 or so. Anyway, him and his sister and the brother were house slaves in Savannah. And during the Civil War, the 54th Massachusetts was with General Sherman, and they were coming through Savannah. He was burning. Remember that Sherman was, burning Savannah to the sea, or burning Georgia to the sea. Anyway, that's what he was, he was like, we're going to burn it all down, And Samuel and the other servants escaped, or they were told to get out, it's over, you're free. But he was in the streets running naked, which makes me think that they woke him up. And he was just running down the streets. He didn't know where his siblings were, where his sister was, where his brother was. He didn't know. He would not know that until long after the Civil War. So he was running down the streets, and he saw black men on horses. And they were saying, he was screaming and hollering. He thought they were going to kill him because there was an issue with dark-skinned slaves and light-skinned slaves. He was in the house, and they were in the field, and they were threatening to kill him. The dark-skinned slaves, who themselves were running the streets too. But the 54th Massachusetts told him to come with us. We're gonna help you. And they took him to their camp. But he had never seen any black people in charge of anything his entire life. And he wrote about it. He was so excited to see, black people that were actually helping. And they were also helping the other slaves that were escaping and talking to them about, this is your brother too. He's a slave too. They left journals, and so they took Samuel to their camp, and in their camp he became. There was a Sergeant Swells, I believe his name was Swells or something like that, but he was a light-skinned brother too, and he took, he became Samuel, he took charge of Samuel. And Samuel was, you know, his person who helped him, and his personal servant. So he was helping. He was helping Sergeant Swirls. And they went better. They went north. And all of the escaped slaves that were taken into the camp, they all went north together. And in the north, in Burlington, New Jersey, was my great-great-grandfather, Robert A. Pinn. He was a Baptist minister who was born free in Fredericksburg, Virginia, was part of the Underground Railroad, and was chased into Pennsylvania with his wife and children. And he went to Pennsylvania. They went to Pennsylvania, right over the border into Columbia. And he continued to be a minister. He was like a traveling minister. Anyway, but during the war, when the war started, the militia was still coming after him, and he moved to Burlington, New Jersey. So this was him and his wife, Elizabeth Jackson Pinn, and their children, and including my great-grandmother, Maria Louisa Pinn, who would eventually marry Samuel Ruth. But Samuel and the others were dropped off there at the home of great-great-grandfather Robert Pinn in Philadelphia. And they were camping out, they were in the house, like Samuel was in the house, lived in the house. And he told him, Robert Pinn, this is what Samuel said. He told me, I'm going to teach you to read and write and do arithmetic. Because if you can read and write, if you're educated, no one can ever enslave you again. So he was reading, he learned how to read and write at Sabbath school, as did the other newly escaped slaves, newly freed slaves that came north with the 54th Massachusetts. And I'm proud of that history. But Leah was still at Hilton Head. She didn't really know where her children were, but she had fell in love with Jack Warner, and they married. And that was her husband, and she called him Mr. Warner. And they had a couple of children. This was, these were black children she was able to keep, or African children. She kept them. And by the time of the Civil War, when it was over, Leah and the others were still going to the fields. They didn't know not to go to the fields, even though the Civil War was over. They were in a place on Hilton Head called Mitchellsville. You can look it up. And Leah was going to the fields with the other slaves because nobody had told them the war was over and they were free. And then she heard they were free, but she said that Fields, who was the overseer, was making them go into the field and whipping them. And so the Union soldier told them, "You're free. You do not have to go into the fields." But Leah, who had felt that whip, that lash on her back, waited till the next day, till Mr. Fields showed up on his horse. And she said that she stood there, and when he pulled up, and he was getting that field, and he lifted the whip to hit her, and she grabbed it, and she beat him near to death with his own whip. She pulled him off the horse. This is a story that's passed down, and she whipped him with his own whip. nearly to death. And I want to know who stopped her, you know. But so she remained in Mitchellville with her husband, Mr. Warner, and the kids. And my ancestor, Samuel, was being raised, you know, he was in the church from the time that he went to Pennsylvania, and he was with Reverend Pinn and his wife Elizabeth and their children, and he and my great-grandmother, you know, became friends, and then they became, you know, in love with each other. And Reverend Pinn said, no, you can't marry until you're 21. You know, you're too young. And so they eventually they left and they went to Chester County, and they worked on farms in Chester County. He worked on a different farm from her. She was like a personal servant in Chester County in a house for these Quakers. So they were both working for Quakers. And when they turned 21, they did what they were supposed to do. They got married. And they remained, you know, married. They had a bunch of kids, like 10 or 11 kids, including my grandmother, Leah Warner. And Samuel was, a prominent farmer in Chester County, Pennsylvania. He owned a large farm. He grew corn, and he was also a minister. They were struggling. Even though they worked hard, they always struggled. But the one thing that Samuel wanted was to bring his mother back from South Carolina. And with the help of the Quakers, they found out exactly where she was. And he took off in a wagon to go get his mother. So when he got to when he got down to South Carolina on the wagon, he found this ferry boat that would take him to the island, to Hilton Head. It was an island, remember? And he said that the boat was so rickety, it looked like it was going to sink. They were trying to go to the island, and the guy that was the captain was drunk. He said that was the scariest boat ride. But when he got to the island and he got to Mitchellville, and he said, I'm looking for my mother, Leah. And they said, Leah? Oh, we know Leah. That's Miss Warner. That's Mrs. Warner. And when they told Leah, your son is here, your son is here, she started screaming. As they said, she fell down at his feet and called him his name, Samuel. And just, and at the time, I believe her husband was deceased, and her children, her one son, Georgie, had been killed. They killed him, meaning, the whites, the militia, had killed him. They were still out there targeting black people. And the daughter had left and gone to Savannah. I think the daughter's name was Isabella. But she went to South Carolina, and she was married. And so it was time for her to go and live with her son, Samuel. And he took her, her and her possessions. And they took the wagon, the wagon trip back to Chester County, Pennsylvania. And he built her a home on his land. And that's where she lived. And she died. She was like 97 years old when she died, almost 100. But she said that, and I want to repeat this, she was Muslim. Her father was an imam. When the slavers came to take her, she said they were at at the river mining gold. So I believe the slavers were there for the gold. And they probably took the gold and the children and probably killed the people who were guarding the children, because she said her father was a mom or a king, which is like a king, I guess. And I think that they killed the people in her village and took the children and the young people. She said they took us 5 miles down and put us on a Dutch boat and held us there until, I guess, the boat was full of whatever bounty they came for, the gold, the children. And that is the boat that they were on, a Dutch boat. She never said anybody African enslaved her. That's not what she said in her story. In fact, she wanted to go home. That was her biggest wish, was to return to Guinea. And because in her heart, she had the hope that her family had survived. And she was never able to realize that dream of going to Guinea. But she was Muslim. She always had her head covered. And she would not go to the church that my great-grandfather started, which is the Church of Christ, and it's still in Urshidan, where they live. So they gave her a Muslim funeral after she died. She was 97. She did not want to be buried in a Christian church. And she is, but she was able to live a long time as a free person and to be reunited with her son. And not only that, the Quakers helped her find the rest of her children, and they were all safe. There was a daughter, I think her name was Mary, and she was living in Savannah, and she said that David had gone to Canada. That was the son. Oh, there was 2 daughters, and I think both of the daughters were in Savannah. And so they were, in the end, she had her family, she had her children back, although she did not have the ones that who were taken from her and sold, the ones that were African. She said they sold all my black children. And those children she was never reunited with. Anyway, but that's, that is what I wanted to share today, because I always want us to remember where we came from, the suffering that our people went through. And time is cyclical. Time is not something that, it doesn't matter now because it happened then. It's cyclical. Everything is in a circle. What goes around comes around. It's inevitable. And in that spirit, we honor our ancestors. We don't worship them, but we honor them, because the person that brought me into the world, somebody brought them into the world. Somebody brought their parents into the world. And back, and we go back. And where do we go to? Creator, through our ancestors. Unless you are come out of the ocean or something, you have ancestors. You have people who brought that spirit, whose spirit created us, who came through Creator. And anyone who says, we just come from darkness, we go into darkness, they're talking about themselves. Because I see my mother and the people that have passed in my life that love me and I see her in my dreams sometimes. I feel her sometimes. And I know that their spirit is soaring. And they have not gone into darkness, but I think that there are people who are going into darkness because they bring darkness into the world. They bring greed and hatred. And it's sad because they don't have or know how to find the light inside of themselves. They're looking for money and power to complete themselves. And in the end, we're all born and we're all going to die. And let's find some happiness in between. Let's find some unity in between. And I'm so glad that you all could join me and hear another part of, my journey in genealogy and connect that to what's going on today. Because I'm a grandmother. I'm a great-grandmother. And I want to be remembered as that, like great-great-grandmother Leah, who was our griot and who kept the stories going and who talked about the what we overcome and how we are a people who came from the source. We are a good, godly people. And the darkness hates the light, but the darkness fears the light. So remember that, do with it as you will, and check with me next time. You all have a blessed day.